Hello and good morning, everybody, and welcome to Pivot Point DFS presented by FanDuel on the Believe Network and part of the Old Man Squad Sports Network. I am Keith Cork. I am your host, and I am here to break down, first of all, a review of Week 5, which is my most successful week to date. Puts us, I wouldn't say massively, but well into the positive on the season. And then we'll go ahead and talk about our Week 6 chalk and pivots. But yeah, it was a great week for me. Fantastic. Hope you guys were able to tail. Let me go ahead and put this on the screen here. Oh, I always do that. I am still bad at everything. I'm sorry, guys, but there you go. Week 5 review. Yeah, I always get kind of confused because I have so much thought. I've thought about Week 6 so much by the time it gets around to recording the show that sometimes I forget what happened in Week 5. So some of this may be a surprise to me. You may see me go like, "Wait, oh yeah, that's right, that's what happened." But yeah, great week for us. Excited to see what's in store here. I think I have some pretty good reads on what's happening in Week 6. I will say between week 5 and Week 6, the pricing is a lot tighter. It is a lot more difficult. There's less very obvious chalk, less very obvious plays, guys that are for sure going to hit value. But that doesn't mean that there aren't, better plays than others, right? So we can still go ahead and take a look and be pretty confident we know where everyone's going to be and where we're going to be on our island, hopefully, away from everybody else, and making some good bank. I am recording this on Saturday morning, which is a little bit different. Usually it's been Friday day for the longest time, but yesterday had a kind of a busy day. So just getting to Saturday morning. So we do have all the Friday news accounted for. I actually went ahead and did all my processes, for all the Friday news that had dropped. So I'm actually more up to date than I usually am. So let's get into it. Last week for the SPY, the top contest here had Browning, Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall, Jamar Chase, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jalen Waddle, Tyler Warren, Ricky Dowdle, and the Saints defense. 231.24. That's a massive score there. The Ricky Dowdle thing dropped kind of late. That dropped actually, I think it was before the podcast last Friday. But either way, I said I was kind of like wishy-washy on it. And I for sure was. I should have been more bullish on him, obviously, at 4,300. But just had a feeling that he wasn't going to like smash it. Absolutely. I went with, Rachaad White instead, who was a little bit more expensive. Still had a really good day. But yeah, it's an interesting stack there. Cincinnati stack. Did he have any Detroit beanbacks? I don't think so. No bringbacks. So just kind of a stack with Browning and Chase, and then just kind of chalk everywhere else. Honestly, nothing too different there. But sometimes it's all it takes. For me, I was one move away really from having a really, really big day, but we'll talk about that. Screen pass, we had Sam Darnold, which was more in line with my build. Sam Darnold, Jonathan Taylor, Ricky Dowdle, Deebo Samuel, Emeka Egbuka, which is a guy I really missed on, but he had a huge day. Jalen Waddle, Tyler Warren, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and the Saints. So 245.14 was the top score there. Just absolute crazy stuff. I'm going to be drinking coffee, so pardons for that. But yeah, just crazy stuff. This was definitely a high-scoring week. As I, had said, I predicted the scores to kind of go down a little bit with bye weeks starting up. There was, I believe, 4 teams on bye last week, but that wasn't the case. We'll see that in a minute here. But here's the chalk. The RBs, we had Devon A. Chan, Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, Ricky Dowdle. So those are the top 5 most owned running backs. Then we had Rachaad White, Omarion Hampton, David Montgomery, and Javonte Williams and Cam Skattebo. The Javonte Williams and Cam Skattebo screenshots here come from the screen pass, which had a few more guys that jumped into double-digit ownership, so I went ahead and included them. But, we had really, like, the running back was kind of solved last week, right? That's not the case this week, but last week, running back was kind of solved. We knew about these guys. There's really no surprises here. Again, I missed on Ricky Dowdle. It is what it is, but other than that, I mean, Breece Hall, we were all over him. Devon Achane, we knew that he was going to be highly owned. It was a good fade. Don't believe I had him in any of my lineups. But yeah, Jonathan Taylor, easy call there. So, yeah, nothing really exciting here. Running back was really pretty spot on. We knew what was going to happen. It happened. Everyone kind of knew. So, wide receivers, we had Garrett Wilson was the highest owned. And, outside of some late game theatrics and heroics, really not a good day. So, got a little unlucky there because he did have that touchdown pass. And, of course, we faded the Fields, Garrett Wilson stacks, but it is what it is. Jackson Smith-Njigba, Nico Collins, George Pickens, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Quentin Johnston, Jacoby Myers, Jameson Williams, Jamar Chase, Ted McMillan, and Ladd McConkey, Jalen Waddle, and Michael Pittman. So lots of different names there. Most concentration, the highest chalk were definitely Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Nico Collins, Garrett Pickens, Amon-Ra. So those five guys had most of the ownership. They were all about 20% owned or higher. Quentin Johnston also came in there as well. I guess you can include him as well if you want to, but I was never on him. I don't think I even called him as a chalk play. We'll see here in a minute, but I didn't. I just don't think that you can really accurately guess who's going to get all that work in Los Angeles. So it's going to be tough. I think you're going to see those numbers fall for those Chargers receivers, especially with the Chargers struggling with their offensive line problems, which we'll talk about for our Week 6 stuff as well. But yeah, nothing really too crazy here either. QBs, obviously the biggest call and the biggest fade of the week for me was Justin Fields, 25.92 DK points, 35.41% owned. He came through for his owners. Absolutely. You could have still placed with him as your QB. But luckily, my guy that I pivoted to did a lot better at a cheaper price. Well, did better at a cheaper price. Not a lot better, but he did better. Justin Herbert was the second at most owned, and then Jared Goff, which was only 8.52% owned, but I included him here. He was top three, and there was kind of a drop-off after him, but those are the top three there. Jake Ferguson was the top owned, which was my play. It was an easy call there. 23% for Tyler Warren, and then 11.58% for Trey McBride. Nothing surprising at all. Top performers on the week for the QBs, we had Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, CJ Stroud, Dak Prescott, Justin Fields, Tua Tagovailoa, and Jake Browning. So Darnold was my pivot. You'll see here in a minute. I had him on basically, I think, at least half of my rosters. Smashed it. Incredible stuff. Mayfield wasn't really on my radar, but I did like that game, as you see. And I went with the guy that was cheaper. And as you can see by the outcome here, Darnold scored a couple more points than him and was $1,200 cheaper. So I made the right call there. Stroud wasn't really someone I was super interested in. Prescott, as I said, had that high ceiling. He ended up having a somewhat ceiling game. It was kind of quiet. Javonte scored a couple touchdowns in that game, so not the biggest one. Then Fields, of course, everyone was on him. So, not too surprising. Exactly how I imagined it, playing out, honestly. Rico Dowdle, for the running backs, Rico Dowdle, Jonathan Taylor, Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt, which is interesting. Javonte Williams, as I mentioned, Rashad White, Breece Hall, and Michael Carter were the top performers there. Yeah, Dowdle, my main miss, just absolutely smashed it. Kind of buried me, unfortunately, under some lineups. Otherwise, I would have had the nuts. I would have had a really, really big day, which kind of takes me off. But it is what it is. I mean, that's the nature of the game. There's luck involved. There's going to be variance. So, but yeah, it's still was a good week. For the wide receivers, Emeka Egbuka, as I said, absolutely went off. Not really on my radar either. But he was only 3.84% owned, so it was less impactful that he went off. But still a really good play there. Jamar Chase, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jalen Waddle, Rashid Shaheed, Deebo Samuel, Devonta Smith, Ryan Flournoy, which is interesting, Calvin Ridley, which is also interesting, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So those were the top performers there. In terms of how well the field performed, tight ends, we had A.J. Barner, Jake Ferguson, Theo Johnson, Sam Laporta, and Darren Waller. 7% owned, so congrats to those 7%. Now I'm on him because it's obvious, but before that, I had my doubts there. And then Mason Taylor also scooted in there, which was one of my pivot plays at 5.2% owned, but he had 17.7 DK points, so he was in one of the top performers. There was a drop off after him. So in terms of how the field performed, I'm calling this now the accuracy report, which I think is an accurate description. 10 out of the top 30 plays had double-digit ownership. So you're talking about 33% of the top plays had double-digit ownership. That's opposed to 24% last week. So definitely more correct the field was this week. 43% week 3, so that was kind of the easiest week thus far, and then 20% week 2. So pretty easy week in terms of deciding who to go to. Chalk hit at a pretty good rate here. 2 out of 3 of the top owned QBs hit 3x value. 6 out of the 10 of the top owned RBs hit 3x values. 4 out of the 13 only of the top owned wide receivers hit value, but that's typically lower. 2 out of 3 of the top owned tight ends hit 3x value. And the wide receivers are typically lower just because of what their pricing typically is. It's typically higher, and we typically have more concentration of targets and less value plays as opposed to the running back position where we have injuries all the time. So 48.3, and this week we might have the lower running backs because there aren't a lot of value running backs out there. 48.3% of the top 29 picks pictured had 3x value. That's opposed to 45.8% last week. So up from last week. 50% week 3, again, easier week. 29.6% week 2. So we had super concentrated ownership and higher hit rate than week 4. Everybody was on kind of the same guys, and all the guys kind of hit. A lot of chalk hit, and that's 3 weeks in a row now that we've had, a lot of chalk pretty accurately. And my question, coming out of this is there opportunity at tight end? That's my main question there, or at wide receiver. I mean, we need to start getting some of these value wide receivers up to snuff. This week there doesn't look like any, but hopefully some of this opportunity does open up. With Tyreek going out, we thought maybe Malik Washington would be something, right? That didn't really turn out to be the case. No Malik Neighbors. We thought maybe Darius Slayton or Wandale or maybe Jalen Hyatt might be a thing. And, we saw a little bit of that, which I think we can use on our main slate going forward in the Thursday night game. But anyways, the opportunity at tight end is kind of the main question for me here because, we have a lot of tight ends that are top owned hitting value, but there's some really decent pivots out there. It looks like I screwed up my slide here, but here's my chalk calls for the week for last week. Kyler Murray, he was not one of the top owned. I was expecting him to be one of the top owned. Played the Saints, good matchup, so I figured he would be one of the guys there, but he only came in at 5.1% owned. Okay, I wasn't super excited about him. He did leave a little bit with a minor injury, came back. Didn't really have like a huge successful day. I would have been pretty ticked if he did because I thought he'd be higher owned, but it's all good. Justin Fields, of course, my most impactful fade of the week. Yes, he was chalk. Jonathan Taylor, yes. Jahmyr Gibbs, yes. Damon Achane, yes. Hampton, yes. Scattaboo, yes. Breece Hall, yes. Rashad White, yes. Rico Dowdle, yes. Amon-Ra St. Brown, yes. Jackson Smith-Njigba, yes. George Pickens, yes. Deebo Samuel, no. Deebo Samuel was only 7.86% owned, okay? And he had a really good day. So that would have been a good pivot as well. Garrett Wilson, yes. Quentin Johnston, yes. Jalen Waddle, yes. Trey McBride, yes. Jake Ferguson, yes. Tyler Warren, yes. Tight ends, again, the easiest. We feel like it's the easiest to call the chalk because we know where everyone's going to be. So that's my thinking when it comes to asking, is there opportunity here, right? Everyone's on the same 3 or 4 guys every week. Who are the tight ends that have a path to getting more targets? That has nothing to do with my week 6. Looking at week 6, I don't really have a pivot at tight end, but I am looking to stack those opportunities because I think we might be onto something there. Okay, my top plays for the week last week. Oh man, such good stuff. Jackson Smith and Jigba, he was 32% owned, but 4.3x his value, 30.2 fantasy points, DK points on 7.1K salary. Yeah, smashed it absolutely. Jackson Smith and Jigba has been having an amazing season. Target shares through the roof. That man's passing a whole heck of a lot, but you can feel pretty confident playing him anywhere, every slate on DFS, everywhere in season long fantasy. I mean, he's crushing it. Jalen Waddle, only 11.82% owned, which is pretty surprising to me. No Tyreek Hill. I would have assumed this to be closer to 20%. But he hit 4.86 value, 4.8x value, 26 fantasy points, 5.4K for his salary. So yeah, he absolutely smashed as well. Getting more than 4x on at least 2 of my plays, 3 of my plays actually as we get further here. But really, really awesome stuff. Breece Hall, 44% owned. This was the part of the Jets that I couldn't, as I looked more and more at it, I could not fade the salary. He was 5.6K. Based on all the other running backs that were in that range, I just could not find myself fading him. So I ended up rostering him everywhere. And he had a good day. 3.8x value, almost 4x, 21.5 DK points, 5.6K salary. Unfortunately, did not find the end zone, but he had a lot of opportunities. Derrick Henry. This was my pivot. And it was a good pivot, 5.46% owned. The theory was no Lamar Jackson. They're going to have to run the ball. That wasn't necessarily a earth-shattering thought, right? People had that thought. But they didn't want to roster him in DFS. I thought for sure this is the edge. This is the thing that's going to take us over the top. And if he had, we would have been looking at, a really, really good day. But unfortunately, he ends at 9.3 DK points on 7K salary, only 1.3x his value. Oof. Yeah, that's rough. He did find the end zone, which was lucky. Lucky for us, lucky for me. But other than that, the Ravens are just a broken team. They could not get anything going on offense. They had no real opportunities to score except for that one that Derrick Henry punched in. And I don't even know if he punched in, honestly. I was watching the game and I was like, please tell me he got in. But I don't know if he did. I think they might have just given it to him. The Ravens had already lost the game at that point. So I guess I'll take it. Jake Ferguson was my other play here, 31% owned. So definitely chalk. 5x value, though, 23.9 DK points on 4.8K salary. Yeah, he was fantastic. There was no other guy I was going to play. He was in all my lineups. So the price was just too cheap, under 5K. Now he's, I believe, 5.3K on the new slate. So he has gotten a little bit of a price bump. So we have to think about it a little bit more. But yeah, this was a good play, obviously. Key pivots I ended up playing. Sam Darnold, played him basically everywhere. I think I had 6 lineups in total. I played him in at least 3 of them, probably 4. 3.72% owned only, 6.2x value on 31.64 DK points, 5.1K. He carried me almost to the big grand prize, but alas. The main cash line in SPY was 176.82, which is up again for a fifth week in a row. 5th week in a row, it's gone up. 164.5 was last week, 150.82 week 3, 147.54 week 2, and week 1 is 122.02. So yeah, it's gone up. It went up pretty substantially, 12 points, just about a little over 12 points. Screen pass was 176.62, a little lower, which is kind of interesting, but as opposed to 163, 152.44. 149.7 and 122.92 in weeks 4 through 1, respectively. Again, it's just it increased again. I assumed less. I think the pricing wasn't super soft to begin with, but then once injuries happened and value opened up, it became softer, right? So, a little surprising that the score is still going up, but not altogether way surprising. I mostly stuck with the chalk, and I had a few key pivots, which really worked out for me. Sam Darnold, okay, there he is, 3 out of 4 lineups. I had a couple free entries. I guess I didn't count those in the slide. So I think I had 6 lineups really altogether. But the free entries are really nothing. It's like the top 1% get anything from it. But I overlooked Dowdle. Yeah, I didn't want to come off of my okay. So this is a good point. I didn't want to come off my Seahawks Buccaneers stack or King Henry, and that's why I really was like on Dowdle. I was just so convicted, so locked in on what I was doing there. And that Seattle Buccaneers game said it could be a shootout. It was it was over 50 points total. So it ended up being a pretty good call, but it definitely made me overlook Dowdle. So that was kind of a miss on my part. Yeah, Derrick Henry's dead to me. I'm lucky he scored. Yeah, we already talked about that. But loose pricing on the Jet Stars paid off, but this week's pricing, it's not nearly as forgiving. So how did I do? How did old Keithy boy do? Yeah, fantastic. As you can see here on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're not, I had won 400 in the spy. I won 50. I won 130, I believe it was, in the screen pass with my top lineup getting $50. So all in all, I made 385 on the week, which puts us up 345 overall, which is nice. Based on what I'm putting in, that's almost 3 weeks of basically playing for free at this point, right? So gave myself a little bit of a runway here to try to go hit that big money goal, and so I'm feeling pretty good about it. I'm hoping I got the right calls this week, but we'll get into that. For me, as you can tell, Sam Darnold definitely my MVP. I stacked him with Jackson Smith and Jigba. I brought back with Rashad White. I did that in the spy for my single entry. I had Derrick Henry there. Of course, we already talked about that. Brees Hall. I had Amon-Ra St. Brown. I had Jackson Smith and Jigba. I already talked about that. But I had Jalen Waddle. I had Jake Ferguson, Rashad White, and I had Saints defense. So yeah, Saints defense also kind of I didn't talk about defenses at all, but it was fairly obvious. As you can see, about a quarter of the field in each contest had that. Just so cheap. You want to go with the cheapest defense that's going to give you a chance to not go negative, right? And just for me, that happened to be the Saints against the Giants, who I don't view as a really good offensive team. Of course, we saw Thursday Night Football. They just crushed the Eagles. So maybe I'm wrong about that, but I wasn't wrong about that in week 5. For my screen pass, I had the same Darnold, Jackson Smith, Jigba stack, but I had a even bigger stack because I had Cup as well, and did not bring it back with anybody in Tampa Bay. Yet this one still scored 204.04, so just 0.6 less than my 204.64 for my spy. All right, let's talk about week 6, though, which, again, I think we have some really good opportunities here. Let me go ahead and pull this up on the screen. Perfecto mundo. Yeah, I think we have some good opportunities this week. Less clear, obviously, than week 5 or week 4. There's going to be, the chalk is going to be less highly owned, right? We're not going to see 40% ownership on somebody. That was crazy for Justin Fields. We're not going to see, a running back that's 25, 26% owned. Just not going to be the case. So we're going to have to, not necessarily pivot as much as just identify what's the good chalk, right? What's the good chalk? What's not the good chalk? So I don't have a crazy pivot this week, but I do have some ideas about where we want to go. So let's start with the QB. Who's going to be chalk on the QB? For whatever reason, it seems like people are on Justin Herbert. And look, I mean, I think I get the theory, where it's, no Marion Hampton, they've got Kamani Vidal and Haskins, right? And that's their running back. So it's who is going to Hassan Haskins, who's going to be the running back there. And if they have no run game, it's going to be all down to Justin Herbert just kind of slinging the rock. But guys, they're missing half of their offensive line. It's not as good as it seems on paper. The Dolphins are a bad team, but their defense is not necessarily a bad defense. They have good pieces on that defense still. So I'm not buying it. It's a fade for me. I'm not going to be playing Herbert this week. He's also 6.3K. And if we look at the QBs, I mean, he's almost the highest priced QB for this week, right? All the elite QBs are kind of off of this slate. The highest priced one is Baker Mayfield. And then you got Prescott, Stafford, and then it's Herbert. So I would almost rather play like Stafford over Herbert against a bad Baltimore defense. I'd almost rather play Dak Prescott against the Carolina defense, and he's got that upside and that ceiling. So I'm really not on Herbert. I think there are other options that I like a lot better. The other guy that I'm not necessarily as opposed to that's looking like it's going to be chalk is Drake May. And he gets the Saints. And yeah, I mean, just had a big, win against the Buffalo Bills in a primetime game. Looked, he looked up and down. I mean, people want to say he looked decent or whatever. Not a big fantasy day, but he made the right plays, enough to win for sure. It was a good game. So not to disparage or anything like that, but it was a bit up and down. It wasn't like all good. But it was definitely more good than bad. So he had a good game. Now, does that translate to fantasy? No. He gets a much better, matchup here. But you can see here that he's had good matchups this season. I mean, he's had Miami, he's had Las Vegas, he's had Carolina, and even Pittsburgh has been kind of questionable on defense at times. And he hasn't really had one of those ceiling games where he's got 30 DK points. His highest is 26.3 against Miami. So I'm not super excited about him, but I think, it's a fine place. 5.9K is his salary. It's a decent salary compared to the rest of the QBs on this slate. So, it's not a bad play, not my favorite play. Probably not going to end up on him a whole heck of a lot, if at all. But that is probably going to be where people are going to go. The next guy people are going to, stack into their lineups is going to be one and only Christian McCaffrey. And I think, excuse me. I think if you can get to him, it's a great play, right? Tampa Bay is a difficult team to run against. Heard that point about 7 times watching other people talk about this. And that's true, no doubt. But he is Christian McCaffrey. They are going to be probably having Mac Jones under center again. They're going to be down Ricky Pearsall, I believe I last saw. So, again, options are limited. George Kittle's still out. So, he's still going to get that concentration of opportunities. So, he hasn't been the same running back as he was in the past, right? The yards after contact have not been there compared to what he's done in the past and what he's been able to do. So, definitely on the decline at this point, I would say, or, something else is going on where the offensive line is just not giving him the appropriate space or something like that. But either way, just the opportunities are there. So, I'm not going out of my way to roster him, but I think he's a fine play for sure. Josh Jacobs, yeah, give me all the Josh Jacobs. I think there's no doubt in my mind that Josh Jacobs scores here. They are, 2 touchdown favorites still, last I checked. Let's go to our good friends, FanDuel, actually. What does FanDuel have this game spread currently at? The Packers, excuse me, 1 second. Yeah, Packers Bengals, it's still a 14.5 point game spread on our partner here, FanDuel. So 7.3K for him. And again, the Bengals, it's a 2 touchdown game. What do you think is going to happen, right? They're going to run the heck out of the ball, and they're going to keep the ball out of harm's way, right? Jordan Love has not had a good season so far. I think we can safely say that. It's been pretty inconsistent, to say the least. So, I think they definitely rely on Jacobs here. Jacobs has been the engine to their offense, gets a ton of, carries each game. 22, 23, 19, right? He's getting a lot of carries in these games and averaging, close to 4 in most of these, 4 yards per carry in most of these contests. So, I'm liking Josh Jacobs a whole heck of a lot. And what we're seeing also in the last couple of weeks is that he's really been involved in the pass game as well. 9 targets, 4 targets, 44 yards, 71 yards. So that's really encouraging there to see. His involvement there really bumps him up to more of a safe territory thing. He's only 7.3K. If we look at the other running backs around him in price, I mean, everyone else that people are going to gravitate to, like Devon Chan and McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor, more expensive. Below him, there's nobody as safe, I would say. Well, there's one, but we'll talk about him in a minute. But Ashton Jeanty, I wouldn't call him necessarily a safe bet. Kyren Williams, I mean, he fumbled that ball and cost them the game. So I'm a little worried there. Derrick Henry, I think Kyren Williams is somewhat safe, but Derrick Henry definitely not safe. Kenneth Walker, this is not a good matchup. I'm not liking him at all. So, he's kind of in terms of like safe per dollar, I guess. I would call it, safe, bankable DraftKings points per dollar. Let's say that. I think that Jacobs is probably your best bet. So I'm going to end up with him in a lot of lineups. Ashton Jeanty, I did just talk about him. Like I said, he's not necessarily the safest one, safest bet, but they are going against Tennessee. So it is a really good matchup here. And he's also been getting involved in the pass game as well. 7 targets last week. And if that can continue, that's going to bump him back up into that safety net kind of area for me. But we can see here, I mean, the Raiders have only scored more than like 2 touchdowns once, right? And that was against my Chicago Bears, of course. So, I guess, no, they scored maybe twice against that Washington Commanders team as well. But either way, it's been a struggle for them, right? They have really not looked good on offense. For whatever reason, Geno Smith is like seeing ghosts out there. So it does worry me. Just the environment of the team is what makes Jeanty not as safe as like a Josh Jacobs. But he's still a very decent play. I'm still fine with it. I'm not fading him. A guy I am fading. Nope, no way. No, not going there, not doing it. Who's that guy? It is Rachaad White. I'm just not going to do it, guys. I'm not going to do it. I did it last week begrudgingly at 4.7K, right? That was the salary. I'm not doing it this week. First of all, he's 6K. Second of all, on 14 rushing attempts, he only had 41 yards last week. He had 4 receptions for 30 yards, but what really made him valuable and made it worth it and made it work was he had 2 touchdowns. 2 rushing touchdowns, as a matter of fact. And Michael Carter no, not Michael Carter, sorry. And he just Sean Tucker is still there. And I don't see him as being like Rachaad White as being like a workhorse running back. I don't think he's a guy you can rely on. Maybe he reaches the end zone again, but he's 6K now. And without that yardage also there, I'm just not doing it. No. I am not doing it. Too reliant on touchdowns. If you want to do it, you go for it. On the Rams side, Kyren Williams, yeah, like I said before, he's decent. It's a good matchup, obviously, against the Ravens. Ravens looked absolutely just disinterested on defense last week. So, definitely an opportunity there. And he's still a workhorse running back. Like, he's still getting tons of work. He had 10 targets in the passing game last week. Carries, nothing below 13 on the season, and he's getting decent yardage per carry also, which isn't always the case with Kyren Williams. Over 4 yards per carry, 3.7 or more yards per carry in every single week. So that's really good. I would say if you're not going to go Josh Jacobs and you want to go a little cheaper on your safe RB, I think Kyren Williams is probably there, right? And if you're talking about like, I just don't know. They don't necessarily give him all the like goal line work, right? They've got Blake Corum there, who can punch it in. They are always throwing it to Devontae Adams in the red zone. So, I think he probably does get the end zone here, but maybe not. And if he doesn't, then that's a problem. But he's still a decent play. I like him for sure. Rico Dowdle, yeah, I missed out on him last week. I think it's a little bit of chasing this week on him. 5.8K now. Last week he was 4.3? Yeah, 4.3K. Obviously 206 rushing yards. He's not going to replicate that. Do not bank on that happening. It's not. But Dallas is, of course, a good matchup for sure. And he is only 5.8K, so I really don't have a problem with him. I think he's a fine play as well. I'll have him a few lineups here and there. But I'm not going out of my way to get Rico Dowdle. We've seen in the past where, and it's a revenge game too, of course. People are talking about that, but I don't know how much I buy into those narratives. But he's a fine play. I don't think he's like a go out of my way to get him type of guy. Definitely not at 5.8K, but he is a guy that you can definitely consider, and he's going to be highly owned as well. So that's something to consider as well. And then lastly, this is my favorite play of the chalk by far, and it's on the other side of this game. And this is why I'm not going to get to a lot of Dowdle, because I don't want to play the running back in both sides of the game. I think it's fine based on their pricing here, but Rico Dowdle's 5.8K, so that works a little bit better. But Javonte Williams is 6.4K against this Carolina Panthers defense. Give me all the Javonte Williams. And I mean, we just look at his work, this season. He's gotten a touchdown in, if you average it out, he's getting one in every single game. But 4 out of the 5 games this season, he scored a touchdown. He had over 100 yards in that last game, almost hit 100 in week 2 against a pretty, not bad, but against a Giants defense. Against my Chicago Bears, he only had 76 yards. So, there is a potential for him not to necessarily quite hit, up to snuff. But in that game, it was kind of out of reach. So, he got a little bit of an early seat. So, I think we can probably bank on, a good 75 to 90 rushing yards, and we can probably bank on a touchdown at 6.4K. Between him and Kyren Williams, I would lean Javonte Williams just because he is going to get all that. He's going to get all the work. Like Miles Sanders was placed on the season-ending IR, so his backup running back is Jaden Blue. Jaden Blue still has to earn the trust of his coaching staff. There's been a lot of talk about his work ethic and things over the offseason. He had blisters in his feet from some kind of like designer cleats or something like that before this game, the last game. So, he doesn't scare me to eat into Javonte's work. I think, he'll get a handful of carries, maybe more than his 4 attempts last game. Jaden Blue will, maybe he'll get closer to 6, 7, 8. But either way, all the goal line carries have got to go to Javonte, I would think. I'm all in on Javonte Williams. I think he's a fantastic play at 6.4K. Moving on to the wide receivers. No surprise here. People are going to be all over Puka Nacua. He's just super expensive. That's my only issue. I mean, he can get, 80 receiving yards and a touchdown and not really hit value for you here, right? At 8.7K. So you saw a $300 price increase from last week. And last week he scored 24.5, DK points. If he does that again on 8.7 salary, he's probably not going to be like the difference maker in a lineup. So I'm not like super into him. If you end up with the price or the money left over to get to him, if there's more value that opens up between now and when the games kick off, a little bit over 24 hours from now, sure, you can go for Puka Nacua, but I don't see myself landing on him a whole heck of a lot. Obviously a fantastic player. It's just the price tag. The other guy, Jackson Smith-Jigba, I'm still on him. His price is still too cheap, in my opinion. 7.6K. Last week he was 7.1K, so it came up 500, but he should be probably over 8K at this point, and he's just not. So I think there's still meat on the bone here. He does have one dud, which was against Arizona, of all people, in week 4. But here we've got a bit of a pass funnel defense here in Jacksonville, so I'm not expecting a lot from Kenneth Walker in the run game. So they're going to have to move the ball through the air. And Darnold's done a great job at finding JSN. So I've got no problem going to him here. I think he's a fantastic play in terms of the top wide receivers. Per dollar, I think he's definitely the safest and the best. Jamar Chase, obviously not safe, even though they've got Flacco now. I'm not sure about that one, guys. Flacco's kind of everyone said it already, but I'll say it. I'll just go ahead and reiterate a statue, right? He's a statue back there, and he's going to be eaten up by that pass rush by the backers. I'm not buying. That's a huge upgrade for them. Egbuka is there as well at 7.2K, and I'm I do like him. I'm just having a hard time buying him as we've seen the separation scores, we've seen things that give us pause. So, buying him as a true elite weapon is still difficult for me. I know people are going to probably blast me or blast whoever says that, just based on his numbers and his actual production. And I know this is just like, stats nerd type stuff that's like, oh, it doesn't matter when it comes down to the actual game. He's a football player. Yeah, sure. Maybe he does. Maybe he has another fantastic game against the 49ers. It's a more difficult matchup, though, than Jackson Smith and Jigba has, in my opinion. So I would much rather go with JSN. But yeah, I mean, in terms of spend ups at the wide receiver, clearly the option for me is JSN. Aguka, yeah, he will be. There's no Godwin, so he does get definitely a bump. I do like him. I'm gonna have him in over half my laps probably. But again, I'm not like, I'm going out of my way saying, oh my gosh, this is the guy I absolutely have to get into my lineups everywhere. So we already talked about him though, so we're good. Tedoroa McMillan is another guy that's going to be highly owned on this slate. And we're talking about Tet. I do like him. I think I don't know. It's not like I'm going like crazy trying to get him into my lineups. I think, at some point he has to score touchdowns, right? And he's kind of the best option on their team to do that. 0 touchdowns on the season so far is pretty crazy for the amount of work that he gets. Lots of targets, workload is safe. It's a good matchup against the Cowboys. So I've got no issues with him. But I don't know. Is the ceiling really there on this Panthers offense? I have my question marks there, so it's not like I'm over the moon on him. You can get BTJ for just a couple $100 more. That's pretty enticing. What we saw from BTJ last week was pretty dang awesome. He was getting pretty targeted pretty heavily. There's Jalen Waddle, just $100 more. So, you can go down to Quentin Johnston, who's even $100 less, or Jacoby Myers, a couple $100 less. So, Stephon Diggs, that's another guy. It's $100 less, a couple $100 less. I mean, it just the other ones around him, which we'll talk about Diggs in a minute here. Yeah, Tet's not like a must play for me, but he's going to be highly owned. Stephon Diggs, we saw a lot of great things last week from him in terms of getting targets and really being the guy to help the Patriots move the chains. Saw 12 targets last week, caught 10 of them. 32 was his long, and that was after the catch. I mean, he was making some really interesting moves, I'll say. Maybe something that he has to do because of injuries, but it was kind of slow. Like he was kind of moving in slow motion, but he was making people miss. He was like kind of like matrixing a little bit, right? Where he was like, would go backwards and make the guy miss, and then go forwards like 5 yards, and then make another guy miss with a spin move or something, and then go down. So a lot of yards after the catch, which is encouraging to see, especially for a guy coming out of an injury. I've been saying this is the wide receiver 1 in New England, obviously. And he's starting to play like that. So definitely a guy, as we see with the wide receiver 1s, they're definitely over 6K. Even Tet on the Carolina Panthers, who is not as explosive of an offense, is 6K. So at $200 less than that, this is the guy I would go to, right? This is a guy I would be happy to get into my lineup. So I like Stephon Diggs a whole heck of a lot. For some reason, I mean, Michael Pittman Jr. at 5.4K is also going to be highly owned on this slate. And I mean, I don't really see anything here that makes me think like I got to get him in my lineups. Obviously having a really good season. I was all over him in best ball and season long. So I've got him in quite a few spots, but like, I'm not over the moon. Like there's not really a ceiling here, guys. Like 20 DK points is as high, and that's from week 1. I'm not really over my skates on him. Sure, whatever. I'm probably less excited about him than other people on this list. Chris Olave. I am still high on him. I do think that we saw a lot of good fight from the Saints last week, where they got their first win against the Giants, of course, and we saw a good fight against the Buffalo Bills. Also, they gave the Bills a run for their money as well. So this team is fighting. And Olave is the wide receiver 1. I mean, it's less of a explosive offense and less of an opportunity than like a Tet McMillan, but he is 5.1K as opposed to Tet's 6K. So. I do like Olave. I think he's fine. I think he's a good spend down option. Again, you're getting a wide receiver 1 for sub 6K, and got to score a touchdown. He scored a touchdown in week 4, but didn't have the yards. At some point, he's got to put those together, right? The yards and touchdowns. And you're definitely looking at a less of a ceiling than other guys, but hopefully get up to about 60 yards and a touchdown. That's kind of the ceiling game we're looking for here. And if he does, he's going to pay off that value. So this is a good value guy, and for that reason, he stands out, right? So if we look at other guys that are in that kind of range, that are around 5.1K. Let's look at some guys that are out there. We got Romeo Doubs, which scored a bunch of touchdowns, but like there's no guarantee that's going to continue in Green Bay. I expect this to be a run game. There's other weapons in Green Bay. We're looking at Marvin Harrison. We know the question marks there. We were questioning his talent even a couple weeks ago, which kind of crazy, but I think he's probably a better player than we're giving him credit for. Matthew Golden, again, same issues as Dobbs. Kendrick Bourne, we don't even know. He could be with Pierce all out. He could be a guy that we look to go to. Calvin Ridley had a really nice week last week. So, there's some interesting names around Olave there, but nobody is as solid. Like we know there's more question marks on those guys than there are for Olave. So Olave, I think, is a really nice value spot right here. Other guys that are going to be pretty highly owned. I don't know why I just turned into Kermit. On the tight end, Trey McBride. No surprises there. He's the top tight end. Not really much to discuss there. Jake Ferguson, 5.3K. Not a lot to discuss there either. Everyone's going to be going towards these top guys, so not super exciting. Probably looking at Tyler Warren being highly owned again as well. Okay. And another guy that's going to get higher ownership that actually jumps out to me. Again, I'm looking for opportunities at the tight end, and he's a little bit cheaper than these other guys, and I think he has a similar ceiling, is Tucker Kraft. I'm not super over my skis shouldn't say that. I think it's okay to stack Tucker Kraft and Josh Jacobs, right? I think that's totally fine. And I think Kraft is in a really good spot here against a team that does not do well against the tight end position in the Bengals. They don't do well against any position, but this is a really good spot for him. We've seen him absolutely smash before, almost 30 points in week 2 against the Commanders. We may have our question marks at the receiver position, but at the tight end position, we know it's going to be all Tucker Kraft. So I'm happy to get to Tucker Kraft here. I think he's a nice value here at about $200 less than Tyler Warren, which not much of a savings, but the top guys, he's at least a $600 savings from them. So I do like Kraft here, and I think you're going to get some leverage with the ownership as well. So I like him a whole heck of a lot as well. I saw some people out there mentioning going perhaps double tight end on this slate. I think that I just mentioned all those guys in the wide receiver around 5K. That I'd be happy to roster. I don't think there's a reason to go double tight end. If you want to, sure. I guess there's no issues with it at all. You can go Ferguson, or you can go and go Kraft, or you can go McBride. You can go Kraft. You can go Warren Kraft and save a little bit there as well. But I think the reason people are saying that is because under 5K at wide receiver is pretty ugly. There's not I'll mention a few guys, but there's not a whole heck of a lot to like out there. But I do still think that there's plenty of value in that 5-ish K range. So I'm not going to go double tight end myself, but I could see where people get that. Okay, some pivots I'm looking at. Let's talk about him again. I mean, second week in a row, I find myself all over this guy, and it's Sam Darnold. It's pass funnel defense. He's got Jackson Smith-Njigba on the team. Just had a really good week, obviously. Not chasing here or anything like that, but he's got the talent, man. This guy looked posed, collected. I know at the end of last season when it came to the playoffs, he was seeing ghosts, man. This guy was absolutely shook. But for whatever reason, during the regular season, that's not the case. Had a really good season so far this year, except for week 1, obviously. Week 1 we can throw out. That was a bad week for the Seahawks all in all. But this is he's been turning it on. And another guy that I'm really all over again this week. So I like Sam Darnold this week as well. Another guy I think more contrarian and definitely not playing well as of right now is Geno Smith. He's 5.2K. I'd much rather go with Darnold, but if you really want to get contrarian in a large field, I think Geno Smith makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. The question is, who do you stack him with? I personally like Trey Tucker. I think Trey Tucker is going to get the better matchup in this game. And a lot of people will go Jacoby Myers, but I think Trey Tucker is going to have the ownership leverage, and he's getting the targets. Like, he's got more fantasy production per game. He's getting tons of targets. Oh, no, that's Deontay Thornton. Sorry, he's getting tons of targets, like 6, 9, 8. Right, he had 2 in week 4, but that was a game that was won. They didn't really need him. But yeah, 6, 8, 9, 8 in those other 3 games, 3 out of the last 4. Tons of targets for a guy that's going to be under 5K, so 4.8K, and there's not a lot of guys down there. So definitely a leverage play there if you want to go stack those guys for sure. And then maybe you go a GNT and then bring it back with like a Calvin Ridley. Oh man, that's such a cheap snack. You can go ahead and get like Christian McCaffrey and stuff in there as well. So I like that a whole heck of a lot. The other guy, which other people are on, and I keep going back and forth on it. I think it's fine. But the other guy is Bryce Young. This is obviously a fantastic matchup for this Carolina Panthers team against this Dallas Cowboys defense that's been pretty bad this season. Definitely has had his struggles this season, Bryce Young has, but he's locked in. He's the QB1. They're going to play him. If he scores a couple touchdowns here, we're really cooking with gas. And if you want to play Tat, it makes sense as a stack there as well. So I like Bryce Young as well. At the running back position, probably not going to end up with him on my teams myself, but at the running back position, I do like Quinshon Judkins as a pivot here. Not a good matchup, right? It's against the Steelers, but he does he's been getting all the workload, right? He is their offense right now. So it's kind of crazy. He's under 6K still. I think his price will continue to go up. Only went up 100 from last week, and he didn't score last week, but he was the guy that was marching them down the field. The problem is that this offense doesn't have a lot of upside. It hasn't scored more than 17 points in any game this season. So, the touchdown collateral isn't necessarily there, but it could be there if they end up, getting down to the red zone. He's going to be the guy that's going to be able to punch it in for them. So I do like Quinshon Judkins. Again, I probably won't end up with him on a lot of teams. I like Chase Brown at 5.6K. Chase Brown, just because of the ownership leverage, really, this would be an ownership leverage play. That's really it. Obviously, a tough defense in the Green Bay Packers, but he should have Flacco back there. Maybe get some more checkdowns from Flacco. Maybe Flacco is able to get the ball downfield and give them more scoring opportunities, right? You never know. So 5.6K for Chase Brown actually is pretty decent considering he was almost 7K earlier in the season. Obviously situation has changed, but still a very decent play. Jaylen Warren is back this week, and he makes for an interesting play as well. Cleveland is a really good defense, but this is the clear RB1. They were running Gainwell out there and a little bit of Caleb Johnson. It wasn't really working. They're going to have to go back to Jaylen Warren, who is really their kind of only option for RB1. And he had in week 3 18 attempts. I'm expecting a similar workload in this one as well. Assuming that the Browns just don't go off like crazy and somehow score 24 points or something like that. I think this will be a pretty safe play here. Obviously, at some point the Steelers are going to be up, probably try to control the clock, so you get some carries there as well. Is he a ceiling play? Not necessarily, but he is only 5.4K, and I feel like he's pretty decently safe. The ceiling play I'm into that I think a lot of people are going to overlook, you can get ownership leverage here as well, is Michael Carter. I mistakenly mentioned him earlier in the pod, but really here we're looking at a guy, he was only 4K last week. He jumped to 5.3K, but he looked fantastic. 18 attempts on the ground, 18.3 DK points. Amari DeMarcado famously and notoriously fumbled the ball at the goal line. Gonna get put in the doghouse. He had quite a bit of work. He didn't have quite. He had only three carries. last week, but he is the passing down back. So maybe, he's not the passing down back now, and instead he goes down of a night. I don't know. But either way, Michael Carter is clearly the ground and pound, between the 20s guy. They're going to try out there. I shouldn't say between the 20s. He's the guy that they're going to punch in the end zone as well. He's the guy that's going to be out there, except for passing downs, most likely. And he still saw work in the receiving game, in the passing game. 5 targets, and he caught all 5. So not bad there. Another guy I like here, assuming we are getting, let's see if we have, it'd be funny if we actually have news about this right now, but no news right now. But Alvin Kamara has been limited, I believe, in the last couple of practices, dealing with an ankle injury. Let me see here. Yeah, dealing with an ankle injury. He's questionable for Sunday's game. He hurt his ankle during the practices, it seems like. So, if he does end up being out, Kendry Miller is probably going to be in all my lineups. 4.7K. I would like him a great deal more than like a Michael Carter. The yards after contact have been fantastic this season. He's looking really strong and explosive and powerful. And we've seen his, workload kind of increase week by week. But we're still waiting for him to really kind of take over. I know there's talk about trading Alvin Kamara. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. But either way, the only cap here is that, again, the Saints offense isn't an explosive one. They're not going to score a bunch of points. They scored 26 last week, though. So, who knows? It is against the Patriots defense that isn't great, but isn't terrible either. They're somewhat pretty average. So, I think Kendry Miller will be all my lineups if we get news that Kamara is out. At the wide receiver position, some guys that are getting overlooked. I like Devontae Adams. Wow. Devontae Adams. Everyone's going to go Puka Nacua. But for Devontae Adams, he's 6.7K. He's $2,000 less, and he's getting all the red zone targets. He's just always going to be a very solid option as a pivot, I feel like. But yeah, 6.7K. So I like him. Matthew Golden, I do like. As I said before, not super excited about him, but I think he is a guy that you can go to if you think that this game's going to be competitive. I'm not going to end up with him in any of my lineups, just full disclosure. But he is the deep threat here for this Packers team. He's been getting more targets as well. Only 5K, so the price is really attractive for the talent. Calvin Ridley, I mentioned a little bit as well, had a really nice game last week. If this Tennessee Titans offense can turn it around, he is obviously the wide receiver 1, and he's under 5K, which is really nice. 10 targets last week, 131 yards. Obviously, some deep balls that he caught there, so can't bank on that, but it is a high explosive upside play. I like Juwan Jennings a whole heck of a lot here. I think Juwan Jennings is a really, really nice pivot, and he's going to be a guy I'm looking at more heavily as we get closer and closer to kickoff. Probably ends up in a few of my lineups. But no Ricky Pearsall, obviously. Brandon Ayuk's still out. I think Jennings is going to be leaned down pretty heavily here. He is under 5K. We did see in week 2 where he had a ceiling game. He had nearly 20 DK points. He's had some quiet weeks as well. But he's been dealing with injuries, right? If he's actually healthy and actually ready to get out there and play, we could see another double-digit target day. Mac Jones is going to be out there under center again. So I'm interested in him for sure. Trey Tucker, I already mentioned him a little bit and talked about him. Isaiah Bond is another guy that's sub 4K. So this is one of those value plays that's few and far between. But Bond was getting a ton of targets. He just didn't catch a lot of them. He got 7 targets, 6 targets the week before that. He even had a target in the end zone, I believe, last week that he dropped. So he went up $500 in price because people were rostering him. But, I still think that there's definitely some opportunity here. He is going to get some deep balls. He is going to get hopefully some end zone targets as well. Obviously, don't stack him with Judkins. There's just not enough firepower to stack 2 Browns on one team. But he is, again, on a week where there's under 4K guys are pretty slim pickings. He is a guy that I'd be looking at. Ryan Flournoy is another guy that's under 4K that I'd be looking at. Obviously, I think we already have news, I believe, that CeeDee Lamb's been ruled out. But, CeeDee Lamb's been ruled out. But obviously behind Pickens, you've got Flournoy, you got Tolbert. There's just not a lot of options here. Ferguson, it's kind of Pickens, Ferguson, and then the rest, right? And it could be the case where instead of Flournoy, they go to Tolbert this week. So I'm a little bit nervous about that, but I think Flournoy, who's a guy that was pretty highly touted coming into the league, that they were pretty excited about him. That I think he is a guy that can hang on to pretty relevant workload. So I do like him. And then one other guy I'm gonna throw out here, because there is no Calvin Austin, and we've been talking about him in best ball season, is Roman Wilson. Calvin Austin out. Who's going to be the wide receiver 2 for the Steelers? And it's not a good matchup. It's against the Browns, so I'm not going to end up on him. Again, full disclosure, I just don't think you need to. But he is bottom pricing, $3K. He is really cheap, and he is a guy that I would consider as a potential to step into the Calvin Austin role. We could see Skoranek, or we could see Scotty Miller go in there as well. But I would probably say Roman Wilson's my personal favorite to step into a bigger role. Some pivots at tight end. I can't believe I'm saying this, but somehow Hunter Henry is a pivot. He's not going to be double-digit ownership. He'll probably be pretty highly owned, probably 7-8%. But he is a guy that's going to be lacking a little bit of ownership. And if you're into, Drake May, I would consider stacking him. We saw that take down a big GPP earlier this season. Kind of a couple quiet weeks in a row. Not great weeks or anything like that. So he is kind of due, quote unquote, if you're into that kind of thing, for kind of explosion. He is a guy I'd be looking at. Darren Waller, I mentioned him before, at 4K is definitely somebody I'm looking at now. He is getting, it's just when they get in the end zone, Devine Achane is just incapable of punching it in via the run game. So they have to look at guys like a big Darren Waller to throw it into, just kind of give him a jump ball to go out and get a touchdown. That's happened in weeks 4 and 5. This Miami team obviously not quitting yet. No Tyreek Hill, obviously. As long as Darren Waller continues to be healthy, I think he is an end zone threat. So he is a guy that you have to consider week to week at your tight end position, unfortunately. Jake Tonjes on the San Francisco 49ers. Also an interesting fella. Another guy that we weren't expecting to do anything coming into the season and has now blossomed into a role player for this 49ers defense, playing that George Kittle role. Is he as good as George Kittle? No, but he is only 3.7K, and he has that touchdown potential as well. And then in large field, if we're for sure looking for a pivot that's no one's going to have, we do have Juwan Johnson in, but I would still take a look at Taysom Hill. Again, if Kamara is out. If Kamara is out, Taysom Hill is going to get some carries, for sure, absolutely. And he might get some QB2 work, supposedly. That's the latest news. So Taysom Hill is a guy I would look at in large field GPPs as like a super contrarian. No one's going to have him, but he has that huge, huge, huge ceiling, as we've seen in the past, where he was operating as the goal line back. I don't think they have to do that with Kendrick Miller in the mix now, but they might still give him a goal line touch or two, which is kind of crazy. All right. So which games can we stack in? I think, in terms of game stacks in this slate, I don't think there's one that we have to avoid. I don't think the only one that I think is going to be popular is the Cowboys Panthers. And I think there's especially on the Panthers side, the prices are so cheap that we don't need to avoid it. So that's the popular one. If you want to fade one, that might be the one I would choose. I don't think you have to. The other games that I'm looking at to stack here, and we're right on it, so that's perfect. Saints, Pats. Saints, Pats is a really good one here. I like to stack the Saints side. The Saints have been really, really scrappy here. You can go Rattler, Olave. You can go, if we get news that Kamara's out, you can go Kendrick Miller, and then go with a Patriots stack with Drake May and Stephon Diggs. You can go Drake May and Hunter Henry. And these really aren't going to break the bank. So I think this is a really, really nice game to stack. Obviously, you've got Rashid Shaheed there as well as a kind of big, punch kind of guy. The other game I like to stack here, which hopefully is no surprise to everybody. But since I'm so into Sam Darnold, it's the Seahawks, Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm going to have a couple of lineups where I stack this game. I think this is going to be a really nice competitive game. This is a fun game. These are kind of the mid-range teams that really duke it out. I think there is a potential here for a ceiling game, for a blowout. Not necessarily as much as the Buccaneers one. I think there's less of a potential, but I still think the potential is there. But all of my, I've got some really good plays in this game, just all up and down at every price point. You got Jackson Smith and Jigba, you got Brian Thomas Jr., you got Travis Etienne, which I would go to. You got Sam Darnold, one of my favorite QB play on the slate. Charbonnet as a guy that punches it in at the goal line. I mean, that's pretty contrarian, but you can go there. Cooper Kupp is under 5K. Cooper Kupp is only 4.6. I didn't mention him as a pivot, but if you're going to use Sam Darnold and do a game stack, as you saw last week, I did that in the screen pass. Kupp didn't have a huge game, but he had 11 DK points. So it was pretty okay. It was okay to do. If you're going to stack this game, I think it's fine. I wouldn't do it without a stack, though. So there's some really nice pieces in this game. And then, of course, with Jacksonville, you also have Hunter Long, who's going to be the starting tight end because there's no Bretton Strange. He was placed on the IR. And you have Elijah Arroyo as well, who's getting a lot of hype in camp. He's only 2.6K. And he hasn't really done anything this season. But, now with no Bretton Strange, maybe he comes in and, maybe he's the guy. We don't know. So, those are two options you can kind of play around with as well. Again, this is, more large field GPP than anything else, but those are some options there as well. Who are my plays that I'm locking into virtually all of my lineups? So far, still waiting on some news, obviously. The biggest one being probably that Kamara news. But so far, in every single one of my lineups, I have Javonte Williams. Every single one of my lineups, I have Javonte Williams. Most of my lineups, I have Chris Olave. I just think, dollars per donuts, dollars per fantasy point, and expected fantasy point, there's no one better. So I've got Olave. I've got JSN. In terms of spend ups at the wide receiver spot, I don't think there's any better guy than JSN. And I've got Stephon Diggs. Again, wide receiver 1 for the Patriots. I'm not going to have all 3 of these wide receivers in every single lineup, right? That's not how it's going to work. I'm going to have probably 2 or 3 of those guys, and then I'm going to go ahead and slip in a different guy as well. Maybe a bring back, right? But 2 out of 3 of these guys are going to be in every one of my lineups. And then at tight end, I cannot get myself away from Tucker Kraft. So Tucker Kraft is in every single one of my lineups as well. So those are the guys. Well, not every single. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say every single one. He's in most of my lineups. But those are the guys I'm locking into, 60% or more of my lineups. Again, it's Javonte Williams at the running back position. Wide receiver, I feel like I have a pretty good beat on these things. Chris Olave, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Stephon Diggs. And then tight end, I'm going Tucker Kraft. I think Kraft's going to be overlooked. He's going to be under-owned compared to what he's doing here. So those are the guys I'm locking into my lineups. And there you go. That's your week 6 look ahead to the chalk and to the guys that we're pivoting to. Again, I'm Keith Cork. It's Pivot Point DFS. Please do me a favor, everybody. Go follow us on Twitter. Pivot Point DFS is my name on Twitter. At Data Driven OMS is my Twitter handle. Go find me. Follow me. Go follow us on YouTube. It's the Old Man Squad Sports Network on YouTube. Okay. Give us some likes and follows, please. Let me know that you're listening, and hey, let's keep getting that money.